Hello there. Hello there. Good evening again. I've got to make this other video because it's easier to end up putting things out there that you actually think is actually playing into the wrong story, playing into the lies and the false story. But what I mean by this is this. Whoever's on duty when deaths happen isn't the principal question. If there's no deliberate harm, it's not about who's on duty. However many times, however many deaths there are, it's not a question of who's on duty. It might be a question of who's on duty if there are specific medical errors occurring. If there's no signs of deliberate harm, if there are no signs of crimes at all, then who's on duty for however many deaths there are? As tragic as those deaths are, obviously, I don't need to keep stating that. I know it's obvious, it's self-evident. But however many deaths there are, if there are no crimes, it's not a case of working out who's on duty for all the deaths, or for most of them, or for none of them. The principal question, as I've said in a previous video, which goes back to what Judy Wood talks about when she's talking about the Twin Towers falling down, and Building 7, in fact, is the primary question in order of importance. The most important question is what has happened, not who did it, as the first question. It might lead to who did it, but in terms of Countess of Chester Hospital, it's not about who's committed crimes. It's who collectively and individually is responsible for failures and gaps in medical treatment. And indeed, in certain instances, for medical errors so grievous, such as has been committed by Dr. B back in 2014, that we know is absolutely cast iron. That's what happened there. Dr. B and a doctor that she was supervising. And then later in 2016, according to Dr. Taylor, and according to the person who wrote the report that Dr. Taylor was speaking from at Mark McDonald's press conference in 2016 in relation to baby O, 2014, but Dr. B, then you get down to who's responsible, because you start to ask what happened. What happened, as opposed to saying, oh, there are X number of deaths, who's on duty? Oh, there's somebody on duty for all these deaths, there must be murders. That's the fallacy that's created. Well, it's more than a fallacy. It's something that's been directed. It's malice. It's malice that was originally designed to, I believe, and I think some other people do believe, in a limited way, to force Lucy Letby off that unit for other reasons, that they didn't like her because she's too conscientious and she's reporting their mistakes, etc., etc., possibly reporting back to the CQC and other organisations, Datix reports, whatever. They didn't want her there. I don't believe in 2015, where they kick off this bullying campaign, that they expect it's going to be one of the biggest trials that's known all over the world as a serial killer trial. I don't think that that's in their minds. They want her off the unit. I've said this so many times. I absolutely believe that if not for the grievance, if not for Lucy Letby bringing the grievance, which she had a perfect right to do, but she's in a nest of vipers there. She's surrounded by hyenas there. I shouldn't really compare to animals. I've got to stop doing that. She's surrounded by very some certainly disordered people, in the sense of being psychopathic or a narcissistic psychopath, whatever you want to call them, bastards. She's surrounded by bastards there, and in an institution that will eventually make a sort of a half-assed attempt to protect her, but then bow to the will of those consultants, and then push her off into this admin job with no reason. With no actual reason at all. They folded when they did that. Back to the main point of this video that is supplementary to the one I just made about the specific point that David Davis makes about she wasn't on duty for all the deaths. By no means, I think the phrase he used, by no means, in Parliament yesterday in the speech. In contrast with what I was saying, what the BBC are asserting, where it's all the deaths. If there are no murders, it matters not either way. That's the bigger point. That's the point of greater importance and clarity and logic. It matters not either way. What matters is what happened in each individual instance with those babies. And as Dr. McConville said in that video where I used a quote from him from one of his podcasts. I'll have to look up the quote now. It was the sense of it was that the event begins long before you see it happening. The event begins long before you notice it, long before you notice it in a very overt way. It's begun before. I should have looked up the actual quote, but you can see it from my videos if you want to. It's from one of Dr. McConville's podcasts. The event being the collapse, the event being what a resuscitation is needed, and very sadly a death happens. That event started a while back when there was no surfactant given, when there were multiple intubations, where there wasn't any clinical oversight there, where there was no glucose given, when there was no antibiotics given to the mum, etc., 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 for all these different cases. By that last video, I didn't want to play into the false narrative, which is what that prosecution has constructed, and the evil that's been constructed by means that's ended up in that prosecution case, that's begun with the idea that if there are X number of deaths and there happens to be someone on duty, somewhere, wherever they actually are, physically, on duty, could be in another room. But because they're on duty, that's the Witchfinder mentality. That, in essence, is the Witchfinder mentality. In a large hospital, how many deaths happen in a year? In a year, across the whole, in the, I don't know if they still call it geriatric department or whatever they call it, or elderly people department. I don't know. I'm one of them, so more or less. But sorry, I shouldn't have gone into that. But in all the departments across the whole year, there are many deaths in a hospital. It's going to be hundreds, isn't it? Hundreds. There are multiple people in any given hospital who are, quote unquote, on duty for 30, 40, 50, 70, sometimes 80 deaths across the year. Have they all committed like 40, 50, 70, 80 murders? Is that the way people should be thinking about it? No. I want to say that's the fallacy, but it's not a fallacy because this has been constructed with absolute will and malice, because their initial attempt simply to remove Lucy Letby blew back in their faces when she, out of her full conscientiousness and honour, supported by her dear parents, brought that grievance, fully justified, and it ended up with this kind of sort of impasse with the management saying, you need to stop this now. We draw a line here, as Chambers say. You go over that line. You don't go over this line anymore. And he's talking to the consultants, and he's mentioning the GMC, and then they go nuclear. And what is the nuclear option? The police. That they didn't necessarily ever think that they would have to do. And that's why they didn't. You see, when it's all being backfilled now, you say, well, why didn't you go to the police before? Why didn't you go? Why didn't you go for 13 months when you just witnessed an attempted murder, Jayaram? Or Breer? You got a draw of doom there. You got a draw of doom for a year there. You're doing nothing about it. They have to recreate the story of before. And it's unbelievable. That's why you've got these lacunae, you've got these lacunae, these gaps in logic. And it doesn't make any sense because it can't. Because they never, during that period of time, felt they had to ever go to the police. Because what they wanted to achieve was her removal. That would have been enough. Had she have left, had she have broken down, which they kind of would have really wanted her to do in a sense, didn't particularly want her to stay on the island of lost souls, as J.R.M. calls it. Leave the trust, get out of their hair as they see it, these bastards, right? Oh, have you heard Lucy they're chatting in their little office or whatever, these consultants. Oh, have you heard that Lucy Letby's left? Oh, she's gone off sick. Oh, I've heard she's moved back down to her parents in Hereford. Somebody told me. Done. It's done. It's done for them. Do you think then after that they're going to contact the police and then Evans arrives on the scene after that? No grievance, no quote unquote case, no quote unquote investigation. I say quote unquote because it's not a real investigation. It's not. It's utterly, wholly fabricated as an act of revenge, really. But then you bring in deeply malignant forces like Evans, and then it can become anything. It can become what it's become. And what it's become is monstrous. But what it also does is show the rot that runs through all these institutions to such a degree that it is overwhelming, actually. It's overwhelming to contend with. That's why a lot of people who just don't get this and they just say, oh, the jury found the guilty, the jury found her guilty. They can't think anymore. Or maybe they could never think. Maybe they could never think, such people. It'd be great to have them on a jury, wouldn't it? And you'd get some like that. Some of those kind of people would get that. Oh, yeah, but they said she was guilty. She's guilty. They found her guilty. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people around like that. I don't know if it's the majority. Not saying it's the majority, but there's an awful lot. And that's doom. That spells doom for justice, doom for truth, doom for fairness. And it dooms individuals. And those systems are chock-a-block with individuals like that. And some of them, and they're all a lot of them coming from these highly educated backgrounds. They care totally for process and nothing for the truth, the heart of the matter, which is what they should be. There was a brilliant line. I put it down in when I was watching, listening to it on Carl in the UK, according to Carl in the UK's channel yesterday, and he said, David Davies said something. I should get the actual quote, but he said, well, it's expedient for the judiciary, or it's convenient. It's convenient for the judiciary, but it's got nothing to do with justice. That's more or less it. In other words, what he's talking about there, they're following their process to the letter to say, oh, well, we're not considering this new evidence. Something like, you could have done it before. You should have raised it before. You should have got Shuley in there before to say that Evans and co are completely misusing and abusing their paper to the wrong ends. You had the chance to do it. Now you can never do it. Now you can never do it. And the outcome of that is Lucy Letby's got to spend all her life in prison because that sick, twisted, deliberately evil system actually is saying it's okay to do that. It's okay to say, well, you had a chance once, now you can never have another chance. That's evil. I don't care whether it's their rules. Well, their rules are shit then, aren't they? Their rules are evil. And the people running it, if they're not jumping up and down about it and refusing, out of conscience, refusing to adhere to such evil rules, they have a duty to refuse evil laws and evil rules like that. When they're being shown, they're being told by the person who wrote the paper, this is nothing to do with what I've written in this paper. And the descriptions of the markings of the body on the baby's body is completely different to what I'm writing here. And all the arguments that Shuley made when they tried to bring the application for leave to appeal. And yet those bastards in those gowns and wigs could just say, well, the process doesn't allow us. That doesn't get them off morally scot-free. Sorry, I'm getting so angry again because, well, I just am angry about it. And I'm angry about a lot of things personally that are going on for me. And it's all the same type of stuff. An abrogation. I can't remember, is the word abnegation or abrogation? Abnegation of responsibility. Pushing away responsibility and just saying, well, I did my bit, I followed the process as an appeal court judge. Oh, I followed the process. It says there, I can't do it. I can't, like it's a law of nature. Like it's like gravity, or it's like you're asking them to fly. Well, I'm not able to fly. I'm not able to fly. In other words, I can't think outside of the box because the box is the process. No, you nail your colours to the mast and you say, I don't care if this is the process. There has to be leave to appeal given here because it's bloody obvious what they've done just with that instance about the misuse of the paper written by Shuley, just as one of many things. You have a duty to do that morally, and fuck the process that you're enriching yourself from in these high status jobs that you think have value, but you're working against the essence of truth and justice. There's no excuse for that whatsoever, and you're a bastard if you do it. And I wish you that you don't have a fucking night's sleep in the rest of your lives. Everyone that does stuff like that. It's the kind of thing that kept Andrew Malkinson in prison all those years as well. It's the same thing. And they're acting as though these systems have been created. Who's created them? Human beings. Really, really stupid human beings. Yes, there are elements of them that make sense, but they don't want to put the bad stuff right. They won't put the bad stuff right. I've gone off on this other tack now. It's not relevant. But just to pull it back before I finish, it was only meant to be a short video. It's the bigger point about deaths occurring wheresoever, whensoever, over however, what level of time. The primary question isn't who's on duty. It's what happened. What happened in each individual case, obviously. But what has spearheaded this and pulled everything along in its train is the idea of who's on duty. And that's obviously been done for a very particular reason. Starts off with workplace bullying, starts off with a desire to remove somebody they don't like for particular reasons, because she's conscientious, Lucy Letby, and she's holding their feet to the fire in ways that they do not want. They want subservient nurses under them. They don't want anybody having the chutzpah to come up to them and saying, well, I think, that's got to be reported, Gibbs, that you left that monitor off. I've got to make a Datix report about that. I won't be like some of the other nurses who say, well, I better not do that, otherwise he won't like me. I better not do that, otherwise it's marked my cards. No, I've got to do it. I've got to do that. I'm not sure if that's ever really fully looked into. We know that Lucy Letby spotted that and made sure the monitor was turned back on, the one that Gibbs left off. Crucial monitor for vital signs. Did she formally make a Datix report about that? And then that's Gibbs going, oh, right. And then you've got Dr. B, and that's what I was saying in a previous video about baby Noah. Did something happen there very specific that they would have wanted to cover that up, so it wouldn't have got to an inquest, so it wouldn't have been established that Dr. B and the doctor that was training under her had made those disastrous mistakes, and the negligence of not looking at the absolute medical negligence of not looking at those x-rays and not following the signs that were coming from those various machines and ignoring them and assuming the machines were broken, caused the death of baby Noah. And as Karen Rees, I think it was, in the internal report says, they want us, i.e. Breary and co., they want us to remove Lucy Letby from the unit without any evidence, and yet there's a doctor there who's killed a baby, and she's referring to Dr. B. And it makes me sick that so many of these bastards have got anonymity as well. Dr. A, Dr. B, Dr. Z. Why have they all got anonymity? It's sickening. The principal reason is not for them. It's because of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve here. They're trying to get a job done, and they got that job done thus far. But we're unrolling it. David Davis and Mark McDonald and everybody who's listening about it, writing about it, commenting about it, thinking about it. Energetically, it's being unrolled. Our will to need to live in a world that's just and fair, and there's reason there. And that dishonesty and lies aren't in the ascendancy, and that we're not living under the rule of lies. We're fighting that, and we're fighting it energetically from our hearts. Just thinking about it, just feeling it, just knowing it, being emotionally engaged in it, and through reason, emotion allied to reason, in every way that everybody is doing, by engaging with things that we're all saying and thinking. There's a common spirit here amongst us all, and it's about this awful miscarriage of justice, but it's also about so much else in our country and in our world. I'll leave it there. I didn't think it would go on this long, but I never do. I'm going to finish my coffee now. All the best to you all. It's going in the right direction. That's all I'm saying. It's going in the right direction. And God bless. Good night.